Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about 2 soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games that they come from without getting too bogged down in music theory. Up first this week for our 2 games is 2019's Gears 5, the exploration of Kate Diaz's connection to the swarm alien hive, while adding open-world hub environments to the classic cover shooter franchise and shortening its title.
Following that is the fast-paced, brutally difficult, bullet-filled 2-man war against an alien invasion using various types of bullets. 1992's Contra III: The Alien Wars.
You had this one sliding back a couple times. I think it was going to be the beginning of the year, and then it turned into the Halo 4 solo episode, and then we had it like late March, but it's finally here, and I knew what game to pair with it. Another game where you're shooting aliens. Pew, 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 pew.
I don't remember what caused this realization, but I was like, we haven't done a Contra game.
Yeah.
This is episode like 180 and we haven't done a Contra game. We should probably do a Contra game.
Also, it's been like almost 3 years since we've done a Gears of War game.
Yeah.
So we should probably do another one besides the first.
It's been long enough that until you said that, I forgot that we had done a Gears of War game.
Do you remember what we paired it with?
I don't.
It was Earthbound.
Oh, right. Oh, that all comes rushing back.
Yeah. Well, at least with this one being in a new Gears saga, we get to finally bring a great composer to the show. Not that Kevin Rapel's great, but I mean, one of the big names in the industry. It's going to be a great one for that. But Joe, how are you doing? What are you playing?
Still just been a bunch of Nirvana Initiative. I have finished both of Ryuki's routes. I'm in Mizuki's route, and I have done like 3 Somniums and yet to have encountered another branch. So that's weird. But yeah, it's going well. It's been very good so far. I'm still enjoying it quite a bit.
I finished Mass Effect 3. So that's done, and then I have installed Eye of the Somnium files. Still yet to start it, but I think I'll be getting to that next. Some thoughts on my wrap-up of the Obama Shepherd saga. Even though I played pretty much perfectly, had over 8,000 galactic readiness, which is awesome. You need like over 7,800 in the Legendary Edition for the best possible ending. I like the synthesis ending. I think it's the best and most uplifting and all that. But you know what? If there's any chance for the future Mass Effect title that BioWare is working on, they've already shown that, my girl Liara is in it, or I should say Obama's girl Liara. She's going to be in that one. If there's any chance for Obama Shepherd to live, despite all that Paragon, I had to go with that Red Destroy ending. Because you know what? That's the quote-unquote perfect ending. So we went that direction. So that was interesting. Yeah, looking forward to Somnium Files.
It's okay. Obama can have Liara. I have Tali. We're fine.
It's all good. And at least in my version, Tali ends up with Garrus. So
that's not a bad deal either. I can accept that.
Although the James and Ashley pairing is always a little weird.
The Ashley and anybody pairing is always a little weird. I won't lie.
Yeah. Aliens. Speaking of aliens, let's talk about some composer follow-up news before we get to talking about aliens. Lots of things happening in the game industry. Let's talk about some of them, including the Nintendo Direct Mini Partner Showcase that we were previewing the day before it happened this past week. And we got a lot of news out of that one. That was a pretty good partner showcase for a third-party mini presentation from Nintendo. Of course, wrapping things up with the news that Persona 3 Portable, Persona 4 Gold, and Persona 5 Royal coming to Nintendo Switch starting in late October. I think it's the 21st with 5 Royal. Nier Automata, the End of Yorha edition, comes to Nintendo Switch, not as a streamed cloud version, but an actual port to Nintendo Switch of a 2017 game, coming on October 6th, 2022. Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is the next game from Simogo. They're the ones who made Sayonara Wild Hearts. And composer Daniel Olsen is back to compose for this game as well, but that's coming in 2023. Kristen Nigas is performing on Return to Monkey Island. That's going to be coming to Switch first of all the consoles in 2022. Grant Kirkhope is being joined by Gareth Coker and Yoko Shimomura for Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope. You know what? When that first one sold as well as it did and made all of that third-party money, you know what? You can throw some more budget at the composition team, because that's a heck of a team up. That game does indeed launch on October 20th after being leaked by a Latin American Ubisoft storefront. And then finally, the Portal Companion Collection is out now on Nintendo Switch, as we've covered both Portal and Portal 2 on the show.
Yeah, it was a pretty good mini direct. I liked some of the games. Harvestella looks very interesting.
Yeah. How many games is Square Enix working on?
Too many. I don't know where they're getting all these people when they still have 14 coming out with stuff and 16 is in development, and so allegedly is 7R, and also there's a Crisis Core remake, and then there's this farming game. They've also got a Switch port of Nier, and what the hell are y'all doing?
And things like the Diofeld Chronicle. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff. It's crazy.
It's almost like they're one of the biggest publishers in Japan or something.
But we'll see what that NFT kind of getting in bed with them, what that does for them. Whoops.
Didn't they like back off from that? Like, we'll use some of it for that, not all.
Was it too little too late? How much did they lose?
I'm glad that Nier is not a cloud version. I'm glad that Persona 5 is not a cloud version. That one I was also worried about.
But then how is Kingdom Hearts 3 a cloud version? Or even all of them, all the Kingdom Hearts. How?
Because everything is sad. When I bought Kingdom Hearts on the PC, when I finally installed it from the Epic Games Store, they're all separate EXEs. Every game is a separate EXE. They could have separated them no problem, but Meanwhile, in a surprise that I didn't see coming, Dicey Dungeons Reunion is a free DLC expansion with 6 new episodes and new music for Dicey Dungeons. It's actually coming out this week on July 7th. New music means new music from Chip Zell. We talked about Dicey Dungeons back in episode 104. It is probably now up there with one of my favorite soundtracks, just in general. It's really, really good, and more of it I will never say no to. I don't know if I will ever see these reunion episodes, because I have a feeling you have to beat the game for that.
Interesting. But I mean, yeah, what a great little addition there. A free update for that, and you can play it on Game Pass. I mean, fantastic.
It's also coming out on mobile phones, iOS and Android. So
rad.
And that game is really well suited for phones, I think. So if you have a phone and you find yourself in the mood to play some Dicey Dungeons, it's coming your way on July 7th as well.
The best of 2022 list contention just keeps growing by the week, as Cuphead: The Delicious Last Course, which started out as a DLC expansion, is now basically a full-on expansion, could almost be considered its own game, honestly, for how much they've worked on it. It is out now with Delicious Last Course. We talked about Cuphead in episode 12, and new music from Christopher Madigan in Cuphead: The Delicious Last Course. The Delicious Last Course. Yeah, it's going to be a fun year-end wrap-up for Best of 2022 with titles like this, with TMNT, with Neon White, with Pokemon, with Kirby. It's gonna be a good year.
But the 2022 best of giveth, but it also taketh away. For Sea of Stars has been delayed to 2023. That is the game by the Messenger developers, who are they're basically making Chrono Trigger. It has music by Rainbow Dragon Eyes. We talked about the Messenger and Rainbow Dragon Eyes on episode 14. It's been delayed to 2023. I'm perfectly fine with that. That game looks incredible, and they could take all the damn time they need.
Yes, take your time, Sabotage. You can do it. And let's wrap things up with VGM Hurdle. We like to highlight this sort of iteration on the Hurdle-Wordle phenomenon, where we get to listen to video game music and see if we can guess it, whether it's in 1 second or iterations up to 16 seconds. Now, we'll keep saying until we break the streak on the show, we've been guessing it in 1 second on our recording days, as it's a new song each and every day.
I'm terrified because I haven't gotten a single one right in 3 days.
Oh, yeah. The last week has been horrifyingly difficult. I don't know the main theme to FTL Faster Than Light.
Yeah, me neither.
Then a random Terraria music drop like, oh, another Minecraft song. So it's been tough. I'm a little scared, Joe, but we'll see if we can keep the streak going. Are you ready?
Oh, I guess.
Let's listen to this first second.
So you best.
What the heck is this?
I have no idea. What?
So you guys.
So you best.
So you best. I don't even have like an idea of a start. Like, Jammer Lammy? It doesn't sound like Jammer Lammy.
Let's search. Nope. Jammer Lammy, no. Jet Set Radio, no. I mean, there's like 5 songs, but it's none of those. Oh man, Joe, I think we gotta skip.
I think so. I think the streak has been broken.
Streak broken. Let's listen to 2 seconds.
So your best friend's a vegetable now.
Oh no. Oh, I know what it is. I don't know what the
it?
song is, but I think I know what the game is.
So your best friend's a vegetable now. What do you think?
I think this is from Battle Block Theater.
Oh, interesting.
In fact, I am actually positive this is from Battle Block Theater.
Well, you got 6 choices.
Yeah, that's the problem. I don't know what from Battle Block Theater it is.
Huh. It sounds like it couldn't. Is it maybe Finale? Like, it sounds like if your best friend's a vegetable now, it sounds like a dramatic thing. I've never played Battle Block Theater. I have no idea.
I think your best friend being a vegetable is part of the central plot of the game. So it might be something closer to the start. It doesn't sound like a main menu theme. I know it's not the lobby. Gift shop doesn't sound like it.
What about Buckle Your Pants?
I'm going to guess Buckle Your Pants. I'm just going to throw a guess out there and let's see. There you go, baby.
Nicely done.
There we go. I just needed a little bit more of that narration to realize what game it was from.
I am very impressed. That turned a situation that could have been real bad into something pretty salvageable.
So yeah, there we go. I've thought about covering Battle Block Theater before, but I don't know who did the music for that game, mainly because it seems to just be a bunch of Newgrounds artists, and I don't actually know if the music was like written for the game. It's difficult to tell. I've looked into it a couple of times because the music in that game is very good, but maybe I'll cover it sometime. I don't know.
Yeah, the game features user-generated music from the Newgrounds community and narration by Newgrounds contributor Will Stamper.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was a good time. So yeah, if you'd like to play along each and every day, just test your video game music knowledge, go to vgm-hurdle.glitch.me. So let's get back to pew 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 shooting some aliens, and let's talk about Gears 5. Gears 5? Oh, do you mean Gears of War 5? I mean, yes, but no.
They shortened it out of shame for not calling the fourth game Gears of 4.
Oh, you're right. That's totally what happened. Gears of 4. Well, Gears of War we have talked about before, but it has been quite a long time. Episode 33 was way back when, paired with Earthbound, and we talked about that soundtrack of the original game with compositions by Kevin Reapel. And Gears of War since then, I mean, what did it do? It had a trilogy on Xbox 360, had installments in 2006, 2008, and 2011, followed by a 2013 flashback-heavy spin-off that was called Gears of War Judgment, also on Xbox 360. But then Gears of War 4 started a new saga. They consider it a saga. They don't want to be hamstrung by trilogy conventions. And that began on Xbox One in 2016, developed by The Coalition, which is a new member. It started out as Black Tusk Studio, but then they became The Coalition, and they were a member of Xbox Game Studios because they were going to be the new creators of the Gears of War franchise and not Epic Games. Yeah, that Epic Games, the one with the store and the Fortnite. They originally made Gears of War with Cliff Bleszinski and all that back in the mid-2000s. So Gears of War 4 follows J.D. Phoenix, or James Dominic Phoenix, and he's the son of the original trilogy protagonist, Marcus Phoenix. And you follow J.D. and his team's fight against the alien forces known as the Swarm, who have appeared 25 years after the defeat of the Locust Horde. In Gears 4, one of JD's team members, Kate Diaz, and it's Kait Diaz, not Kate. Anyway, Kate has her mother, Reyna, stolen by the Swarm. And the main focus of the story, on top of pew pew pew, kill them aliens, it really becomes all about getting Reyna back. And it leads to Kate killing her mother at her request, when Reyna has become too forcefully integrated into the Swarm Hive's network. So, Gears 5 released September 10, 2019, about 3 years later, for Xbox One and PC. It was updated for Xbox Series X and S on November 10th, 2020. In fact, you can play the whole Gears franchise on Xbox Game Pass, but if you want to start at Gears 5, it's not a terrible place to do so. You can probably get some enjoyment out of it, but I feel like for full appreciation, you kind of need some knowledge of what's happening in this franchise. The game is developed by The Coalition and published by Xbox Game Studios. Gears 5 follows the franchise establishments by being a third-person shooter with bulky, dystopic, military sci-fi themes, which is heavily reliant on cover mechanics and also mobility between those points. One of its primary gameplay mechanics that's carried over and it's unique to the series is its active reload system, where you have to press the right bumper to start the reload and then press it again when a little bar comes across a meter, press it at the right time and you do a fast reload. If you miss it, you reload a bit slower. Also, the Lancer assault rifle is the iconic weapon from this series, where it's the assault rifle, but it's got that attached chainsaw blade. So rev it up and use your chainsaw on big alien baddies. New to this franchise, though, in this installment, the player can complete various side quests as the player explores the game's world that is occasionally made up of a few open world hubs. You can either explore it on foot or get on this big sort of rider sail thing called a skiff. So it's a neat little vehicle that you can use to explore the world. Also, by exploring these open world hubs, you can discover collectibles and essential components that are needed to upgrade Jack, a robot which accompanies you throughout the game. By upgrading Jack in these kind of light RPG mechanics, you can unlock new skills such as scanning enemies, cloaking you and your squad, stunning enemies, and deflecting bullets using an energy shield. There are also multiplayer modes for Gears outside of the campaign. I mean, if that's your thing, but not really for us here. So let's talk about the story of Gears 5. Following the events of the previous game, J.D. Phoenix, Delmont Walker, and Marcus Phoenix are officially reinstated in the COG Army, along with Kate Diaz, who is given the rank of Corporal. Reformed as the new Delta Squad, the player assumes control of Kate And if you play this game in co-op, which you totally can, Del has the option of becoming player 2. The new Delta Squad then travels to the ruins of Azura at Damon Baird's request in order to launch a satellite in an effort to restore the Hammer of Dawn network to strike at the Swarm alien forces. Now, restoring this laser weapon from the sky is a contentious situation, to say the least, and when things go awry, Kate and Del lose trust in JD as a leader, causing them to splinter off and continue Kate's more personal mission. See, Kate's been having visions that make her worry that she is more connected to the Swarm than she knows. So Marcus suggests that she should investigate a secret lab that may have the answers she seeks. Big questions here. What is Kate's connection to the Swarm? And how is the Swarm connected to the Locust Horde? And beyond that, how is this all tied to the necklace that Kate got from her mother Reyna at the end of the last game? Bigger picture, can Delta Squad activate the Hammer of Dawn network and safely keep it under control to fend off the Swarm? So Joe, here's where I'll ask you, what are our experiences with Gears 5?
I probably said this during the Gears of War Earthbound episode, but that was 3 years ago, so I'll say it again. I think I played some of Gears of War 3 at some point, and I didn't like it. I just didn't like how the game felt. I don't think I was a big fan of the active reload mechanic. I didn't like how things moved. So I haven't really played a lot of Gears of War because that was a bad first impression, and I just don't think it's for me, personally.
I tried Gears of War twice, which I probably said on that episode, which, by the way, 3 years ago in September 2019, it was tied to the launch of this game. So it all comes full circle. I started the original Gears of War twice and did not get very far, did not like it either. But when I was curious and trying Gears of War 4, it was a GameFly rental, and I decided to play it co-op with my brother, and we had a pretty good time with it. So much so that when Gears 5 came out, we played it co-op again. And it was easier that time because Microsoft was a couple years into trying that whole Game Pass initiative. And that was one of the first big things where, hey, we've got this big game Gears 5 coming out. You can try Game Pass for $1 and get 3 months worth. And that was my entry into Game Pass, which I'm still subscribing to today. But that was a very good proposition of, hey, for free, try this new game. That's, one of the big blockbusters that was launching on Xbox in a time of them struggling to find exclusive games, let's just say. So yeah, I played it. I didn't remember too much of it. I remember the big moments. There are big moments for sure in this game, which we'll talk about eventually. But yeah, I knew a bit about the soundtrack. Knew it was one, maybe we talk about eventually, but it was more the push to talk about the composer that necessitated this. And let's get back to talking about Gears of War. Because yes, Gears 5 is part of the Gears of War series, and yet they decided to change the title in this installment to just Gears 5. Not Gears of War 5. Drop in the of War, because Xbox marketing boss Aaron Greenberg explained that the new title was cleaner, and it was a natural change because most people had been ignoring of War for years. They just called it Gears, and that's fair, but maybe there's got to be something about branding in there. I don't know.
I imagine a not insignificant part would probably be the joke of, if you write GOW, which game are you talking about?
Right. Which of War game specifically, too.
Oh, gee. Yeah, I imagine that might have something to do with it.
But I still think of it as Gears of War 5. And so it takes some recalibration in my mind doing the research. Okay, Gears 5. And according to the studio head at the Coalition at the time, Rod Ferguson, I think he's one of also the forces, along with Cliffy B, behind the original Gears of War. So he says that the shift to playing as Kate Diaz instead of JD Phoenix, who you play as in Gears of War 4, he says the shift made sense. Quote, "It was a natural choice. When you play through Gears 4, think of it as Mad Max Fury Road. It was really Furiosa's story, and Max was the sidekick. That's how it felt in Gears 4. The whole game was about saving Kate's mom, and really, JD is there to help her." So, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Good to have a woman as a protagonist, get that in there, especially in a franchise that has been portrayed for years as beefy dude man bros in a army shooting at aliens. Like, Kate is actually a refreshing change of pace, and her portrayal by Laura Bailey is great, and it was award nominated. The game also has a conscious effort to remove smoking in it. Rod Ferguson said that he had a very personal kind of confrontation with that. Like, he's seen the effects of smoking. So the team made a conscious effort to remove that from the game. It was also in partnership with the Truth Initiative. Since most of Gears of 4 takes place at night, I even remember that E3 demo of super, super dark scene. It's lit up by pew, 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 gunfire. The team made the decision to have most of the levels take place during the day. And why not? It shines with all that color. You got the blue ice in that environment. You got some of the red sand. It's a good choice there. Gears 5 was leaked in an infamous Walmart Canada screenshot. And that was officially before it was announced at E3 2018, alongside Gears Pop and Gears Tactics. Gears Tactics, another the Coalition game. I totally forgot about those two. I'm going to be honest.
I don't forget Terminator, because if you'll remember, that's the year that like 5 games randomly had a Terminator crossover.
That's right. They did announce the Terminator crossover, and I feel like, Gears was the start of it, but it's like, and another one.
Yeah, it was like an E3 where Terminators just kept showing up. They really wanted Dark Fate to do well.
Yeah, they did. You could have Sarah Connor or the T-800 show up in Gears. Eventually, they also had a crossover with Dave Bautista. Bautista is in Gears. All because he talked about how he wanted to play Marcus Phoenix if Gears of War ever had that Hollywood adaptation really come through. So...
See, now that one I'd forgotten about.
Yeah, that was a weird one. I think that was at like the next E3 or something like that. It was some other show. Very, very strange. Gears 5 reviewed well, with a Metacritic average of 84 on Xbox One and 82 on PC. Critics praised the gameplay as a return to form for the series. The overall campaign was liked. The presentation of the game and the amount of content, there was enjoyment there, but there was criticism for the story that seemed to be rehashing some of the missteps of the previous games. Not too sure what exactly they're talking about there. Also, there was talk about a lack of innovation. And I don't know what those reviewers were talking about, or if it was just like a poor summation of some of the critics' points, because a lack of innovation, yeah, okay, you're trying open world hubs, light RPG mechanics, side quests in Gears of War. Granted, other games do it much better, but that's still trying to innovate on Gears. Oh, okay. Still, Gears 5 was the biggest launch for Xbox Game Pass at the time, with 3 million people playing the game in the first weekend. There has been no indication that it outsold Gears of War 4, though. I mean, I guess, sold almost like 1 million more as far as that goes. But, that kind of comes with the territory of a different distribution platform. Are you going to say you sacrifice sales to have players play on Game Pass, but then it's subscription money? How does that all balance out? It's part of the tricky stuff there. The game was nominated for Performer in a Leading Role at the BAFTAs, with Laura Bailey's performance as Kate Diaz, and it was also nominated for Action Game of the Year at the DICE Awards. It was nominated for Best Audio Design, Best Performance, and Best Action Game at the Game Awards, and it was also nominated for Best Cinematic Cutscene Audio and Best Dialogue at the Game Audio Network Guild Awards. What is the legacy of Gears past Gears 5? Well, Rod Ferguson, the studio head at the Coalition, left the studio in February 2020. He's now at Blizzard, and he's overseeing Diablo 4. That's right, he popped up in that Diablo 4 presentation during Microsoft's briefing. It's like, oh, hey, I guess you're still working with Microsoft in a way still? All right.
Can't get away.
The big money grabbeth all over. There was apparently a single-player expansion for the game called Hive Busters, which was released on December 15th, 2020. I had no idea about that. Also didn't know that it starred Coltrane's daughter as one of the supporting characters. That's weird. It's also a direct prequel to the Gears of War Hive Busters comic book series. Again, news to me. And it has the playable characters from the Escape multiplayer mode, which are Lonnie, Keegan, and Mac. Besides working on Gears Tactics, which launched in 2020, the Coalition has to be working on Gears 6 at some point. I feel like over the next couple years, a reveal trailer is all but an inevitability. Who knows when it comes out in the COVID fallout hell time, but we'll see.
One day, maybe, probably.
The composer for this game is a big one in the media industry, and it's Ramin Djawadi. Ramin Djawadi was born on July 19th, 1974, in Duisburg, North Rhine-Westphalia, in West Germany, to an Iranian father and a German mother. The film The Magnificent Seven inspired him to be a film composer when he was younger, and he ended up studying at the Berklee College of Music. After graduating from there in 1998, Djawadi garnered the attention of one Hans Zimmer, who recruited him to Remote Control Productions. Apparently, the connection was made through a good friend of his in Germany. That's an owner of a guitar store. He was chatting with him on a visit home to visit his family, and his friend said, "Oh, so you want to compose? I know somebody that knows Hans." And so the connection was made. Djawadi moved to Los Angeles and worked as an assistant to Klaus Badelt. From there, he made additional music and arrangements for Badelt and Zimmer movies, such as one of the best film soundtracks of all time, Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl.
Yeah.
Just a great soundtrack to kind of get your start on there. But in 2004, Djawadi went out on his own for scoring Hollywood films with Blade Trinity. And then his career took off with 2008's start of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Iron Man. Djawadi won back-to-back Emmy Awards for Outstanding Music Composition for a Series for his work on Game of Thrones. He apparently thought of its iconic opening theme song during a drive in the car, just humming it after seeing the visuals for the first time. Yeah, Game of Thrones. Opening, the score, the whole thing. I mean, Light of the Seven, like an incredible track. So Djawadi, he's done a bunch of stuff, but like Game of Thrones is usually the big one that he's cited for. Djawadi is married to Jennifer Hawkes, who is a music executive in the film industry, and they are the parents of twins. His approach for games, since he, notes, as many composers often do, that it's different than films and TV because you can't necessarily control what the player decides to do. So he says, quote, "The approach is often to create 2 or 4 minutes of an action or tension piece that captures a mood that underlines what the theme is. The main idea is to find the style and melodies and then dissect and rearrange." Also, according to Djawadi, he experiences the perceptual phenomenon known as synesthesia, where he may associate colors with music or music with colors, and it allows him to visualize music. Always fascinating to come across those who describe their interaction with music that way.
I did not know that he did Game of Thrones or Iron Man. So, you'll mention it here in a second on the discography. I basically only know his name because of one movie. I didn't know he did Iron Man, even.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah, there's that. But the reason that I know his name is because he did the really, really cool score of Pacific Rim.
Ba-da-bum, ba-da-bum.
That movie's score is so damn good, and it's the main reason why I know Ramin Djawadi's name.
Mm-hmm. So let's go through that discography for Ramin Djawadi. For films, some of them include Blade Trinity, Open Season, Deception, Iron Man, Clash of the Titans, Red Dawn, Pacific Rim, Warcraft, The Great Wall, A Wrinkle in Time, Eternals, the recent Uncharted movie, and he's working on the soon-to-be-released The Man from Toronto. For TV, there's Prison Break, Game of Thrones, Person of Interest, The Strain, Westworld, Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan, and also the soon-to-be-released House of the Dragon, the Game of Thrones spin-off. When it comes to video games, he was an audio technician on System Shock 2 and Thief 2. That must have been, some time before he got involved in the film industry. He composed for 2010's Medal of Honor and its follow-up, Medal of Honor Warfighter. There's Need for Speed Shift 2 Unleashed. Of course, makes sense that he would compose alongside Jared Emerson Johnson on Telltale's Game of Thrones. Then there's Gears of War 4, Gears 5, New World, which is Amazon's, I would say, ill-fated MMO game that came out a few years ago.
Forgot that existed.
And also the previously mentioned The Diofield Chronicle. I don't think he's taking the lead on that one, but he's got a protege coming up, but he's co-composing it along with them. Crazy.
That is weird. Square does not seem like the kind of place that's like, yeah, let's just go grab this Western artist to do the music for us.
But at the same time, isn't that the game that's kind of like a tactics, like a Fire Emblem, so there's some fantasy sort of strategy? I don't know.
I don't think it's exactly like Fire. It's like this weird type of gameplay that doesn't make any sense from what we have seen. They have not explained it well. It's like a weird fusion between an RTS and a tactics game. I have no idea. I remember people being very confused when they saw gameplay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Djawadi got involved with Gears of War because the top brass at the Coalition, during their pre-production for Gears of War 4, they were watching Game of Thrones at the time, and we like that music. Can we get that guy to do the music for our game? And they sure did. In the early stages of development on Gears 5, the Coalition audio director, John Morgan, sent Djawadi a 20-page pre-production deck outlining the characters, the theme, and the story. From there, Djawadi started writing music that he felt captured the spirit of what the game will be, and then he programmed the melodies into his computer as a demo. The first listen, according to Morgan, is usually a hit or miss. It can be a toss-up. But he says, quote, "When we got the sound files and put them in the studio, we were blown away. Every song we listened to, we felt like it had a home, and we felt the emotion in the music. Ultimately, the soundtrack was recorded with an orchestra of over 70 people, recorded at Sony Studios in Culver City, California." And then there was a weird blurb about the soundtrack on Djawadi's Wikipedia page that says, "The soundtrack was copyrighted and cannot be used even while playing the game online." I don't know what that means, but I thought I'd throw it out there. Maybe there's issues listening to it on Twitch or something like that. Maybe it'll get copyright hit or something like that, but it's a heck of a soundtrack.
That's exhausting. That's exhausting.
For so many reasons, yes, I know. But let's listen to that music and hope that we don't get hit with copyright as I discover this way too late. Let's talk about the critical 5 tracks for Gears 5. And we'll start with Family. So, of course, family being one of the driving themes throughout the last game and also this game as you're dealing with the fallout of what Kate did to her mother, Reyna. This is, I believe, the main menu theme. It was a little tough to discern where exactly these played, but, I gave it my best shot there to figure out. It's a piece that starts really quietly, but this is kind of one of the big swells and hits here. And I like how it has this dun 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 dun. It's got this kind of rhythm that feels pretty familiar with Gears of War. And the chords that kind of come in here as the slow melody kind of comes through. I feel like it sets a good pace. A lot of people online seem to relate to it as like, yes, you're waiting for a match to load in multiplayer, and this theme comes in. So there's some good nostalgia here. It's not the main theme that everyone points to for this game, but it's a good one to kind of start things out.
Yeah, I think this is really good. For some reason, I just want to say Uncharted. It's not exactly the same. Uncharted is a lot more
heroic, triumphant.
Yeah, optimistic.
Yeah.
But this feels like a kind of similar theme, just with the tone changed.
Oh, yeah. Gears is definitely darker, and so he really brings that here. That kind of chord that comes in at the end of the clip there. Like, it's good stuff on this one for sure, and a lot of people definitely praise it. But the big one from this soundtrack, like, if there had to be one, it would be this track here from Gears 5, and this would be Kate's theme. So, I mean, you can play as Del if you're in co-op, like I did. I played as Del when I played with my brother. But this game is all about Kate Diaz, and so it would make sense that Kate's theme would be the main theme for the game's primary protagonist. And this da-da-da-da, like, that's a leitmotif that'll come up a lot throughout the game. It would make sense. It's kind of her personal struggle and her journey. There's also a sinisterness to this theme that I love. And, we've talked, Gears is kind of a darker game and all that. But when you're talking about looking into how Kate could be connected with the Swarm because of these visions that she has, and what does this all mean? What happens when you discover that, like, the real threat to the planet could be you? And so you want to be heroic. You're part of the COG, you're part of the military here, but there's a danger lurking possibly underneath that you may not be able to control. And I feel like that's exemplified perfectly here in this theme. So good.
Yeah, the first thing I was going to say is this does not sound like a protagonist's theme. Like, you think of a protagonist theme, we were talking about Uncharted earlier. You think, major key, triumphant, cool. And this is, it's the third one, but it's neither of the other two. At all in any way, shape, or form. And yeah, I guess the idea that, like, possibly she's a threat and a problem, I guess, yeah, that brings that across really well.
When the game opens up, though, I believe the first world that it does so is this kind of bright blue. It's a nice splash of color and all, like the gray and the kind of the machine, the military and all that. But then you get to number 3 on the Critical 5, and this is Ice Overworld. Such a cool piece, not only representing the big, like, splash of color that finally comes to this game, but also the big sense of scale. And you really feel that in the music, that it's exemplified by this lighter sort of tone to it. It's more positive. You don't have, like, the heavy horns and strings weighing you down. You've got this light flute underneath. These flutes that like just kind of gives it this airiness, which makes sense because you're exploring this first overworld on this skiff runner sled. Open up that sail and move faster than you've ever could have imagined before. Go to different checkpoints on that hub world instead of lumbering around with your heavy suit of armor. It's nice. It's freeing. I don't know if it necessarily represents an ice overworld, but I feel like it's a good example of like finally freedom.
Yeah, I don't know if it's what I would think of if I was thinking of an ice area. I do like those flutes. You describe them as airy. They're also just kind of shrill in a really, really interesting way. And I think that's the main thing that caught my attention in the song in general. And maybe that's supposed to be like the cold, stinging wind of the area. I don't know. I could see that.
We're going to get into spoilers to talk about critical track number 4 because there are certain things that you remember from this game. And it's been 3 years, honestly. If you really want to play Gears 5 at this point, if it's sold you in any way, go check it out. But we're going to delve into spoilers to talk about number 4 on the Critical 5 for Gears 5. And this is Queen Ultimatum. It's a different piece than we usually highlight here on the Critical 5, but one that certainly starts with that leitmotif once again. The da-da-da-da. So Kate has a big decision to make. And last chance to back out now for spoilers. Joe, you don't care if I spoil Gears 5, do you?
Yeah, I'll live.
In case you never came across it on the internet or anything like that. In a franchise that has usually been very linear and has its character deaths, impactful as they are, Dom's sacrifice in Gears 3, I think it was. Like it's, one of those big moments that like they shock you, but it's the story and you don't really have a choice in it. You have a diverging path in this game. And it's hard to tell what's canon because at a certain point, the queen of the swarm, who is a reincarnated Reyna, her mom comes back to life because Reyna's mom is Mira, the queen of the Locust Horde. And you learned that like they experimented on humans to kind of create the Locust Horde. And then it kind of descends to Reyna. And so Kate is the granddaughter of the Locust Queen, who may or may not have a presence still lingering throughout the swarm, which are like twisted locusts, sort of adapted locusts. Anyway, point being, reincarnated Reyna is this queen, and she gives Kate the choice of who are you going to save, Del or JD? You got to pick one. You can save one of them, but the other's dead for sure. And I feel like my brother and I picked the unpopular opinion of JD's been kind of an asshole in this game. And we've been going through this adventure with Del. So kill JD, even though it's going to break Marcus's heart for as much as he's gone through in this franchise. I don't know if that's like the popular or the canon choice. But it's also kind of weird for a franchise to be really on the straight and narrow with the narrative is telling you, and then suddenly, boom, here, make a split decision. Who knows what it's going to mean for the future? Okay, good luck. And it's reflected in this piece. Like, it's not a song that's playing throughout a level or something. It's very scripted for the moment, to the point where you hear the Kate leitmotif before she's got to make this big choice. There's a lull to it, and then the boom on the impact of here's the consequences of you making your choice. It's a piece that's maybe not among the best or whatever, but I feel like it's the one thing you remember from playing this game is like, yeah, they gave you a choice on who to kill, and let's play the song that represents that.
Yeah, I think that's your decision. If it's a memorable moment and you can pick the track that plays during it, yeah, I think that's fair.
Absolutely. And so then we'll wrap things up on the Critical 5 with number 5 here. This is Bittersweet Victory. All right, so you rallied everyone together. You got that Hammer of Dawn pulled together. You got it calibrated just right. You send that laser down from the sky. You hold off the swarm for now and its big Kraken monster, but the threat's not fully over. You still got to figure out what's going on with how Kate is truly deeply connected. Is she going to fall prey to the swarm at some point because of her lineage with their queen? And then you also have the fallout of the decision you made, whether it's Marcus's son, JD, or your buddy Dell that you had this adventure with. So it's victory for now, but it's bittersweet. And so it plays during the game's ending. And this is big with, bringing in the piano. We like piano, but blending it with this orchestra just makes it somber. And like there is a victory to it, but at what cost?
Yeah, I think it gets that across very well, honestly. It kind of reminds me of when we've talked about like the hub music for Dark Souls games, where it's like, yeah, you're safe now.
Yeah.
But that safety isn't going to last, and you know it. And I like that. That's very interesting.
For tracks on the cutting room floor, I have 2. The first of these is Fracture. In the beginning of the game, after the Hammer of Dawn does not go all that well the first time, and there's dissent in the group, we question how JD is at being a leader when he's made some questionable decisions in his past. And so the group splits up is my best guess. Again, couldn't really tell, but for a track called Fracture, it kind of makes sense where it's placed in the soundtrack and as well as the game's plot. Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like it's also replicated really well in the drum beat here, where you got this cha-cha, cha-cha, cha-cha. You get these little triplets thrown in there just to throw you off a little bit.
Yeah.
To just show that instability just so. And I think it's really well done there. Again, not, a super special piece. But I feel like one that is well represented of its supposed point in the story and how it represents that musically.
Yeah, I think the drums are by far the star of the show. They're really, really cool. Yeah, I could picture this being like a moment where the mission is not going great. So I choose to believe you got it right.
Mm-hmm. And then the second one on the cutting room floor for me is Sand Overworld. This vast open desert of red-orange sand is yours to explore, where you have the skiff. And I feel like I included this one. It makes me feel a little bit like if Jack Sparrow were in Gears of War. And knowing Ramin Djawadi's connection with Curse of the Black Pearl and Klaus Badelt and Hans Zimmer, you know what? I feel like that kind of tracks. So this one's just a fun one. Again, another big hub world to explore in Gears and collect more side quests and parts for Jack and all that. But you named the robot Jack. Okay, all right, we got that out of the way. Cool. So yeah, I feel like a little bit of Pirates of the Caribbean in Gears of War.
It definitely does fit a lot better with my preconceived notions of how this environment is supposed to sound in a video game than the ice overworld does. But also, like, I don't know, it's missing the unique sort of thing to really grab me, like the woodwinds in the ice overworld music.
Yeah, I feel like it's anything, it's more plucked strings in this one that kind of take the center stage there.
And I mean, it's good, but I do think overall I like the one that ended up in the Critical 5 better.
I agree with you. Yeah, it's a good pick, and saying it's a good pick, that's why I included it. All right, what will I never forget about Gears 5? I mean, I think about it every now and then of like, oh, what's Microsoft going to show? Are they going to show Gears 6? And it's like, oh yeah, what is going to happen with that? What's going to be the canon ending? I feel like what we picked is the unpopular choice, but we'll see if that is. Have Marcus suffer more, I guess. But yeah, see what the fallout is going to be with that. If it's going to wrap up a trilogy or if it's going to be, we're not bound by trilogy norms. Let's continue our saga. But also just, playing this game with my brother, the Game Pass I always think of with that. It's kind of where my journey with that subscription service started and hasn't really steered me wrong yet. Continues to be quite the value in games.
So for you, it's your Halo, because that was my first big Game Pass thing. I'm sure I played a game before that, but Halo's the earliest I can think of playing that with Matt.
Yeah, like the reason why it's like, all right, I'll put my money down, put that credit card info into the Microsoft box.
With the 3 digits on the back.
All of it. All right, to transition to our next game, talk about more pew-pew shooting aliens. I'd like to highlight a fan cover, a fan remix, whether it's on OC Remix, YouTube, wherever. Pretty tough to find a cover, but Badr Nana, we've talked about him before over on YouTube, BADERNANA. He covered Kate's theme in what he calls Gears 5 main theme. It's a nice metal rock version. And I think it sounds really good, so please check it out. Please enjoy. We'll be right back.
All right, so we said we're going to more pew pew aliens, but this would be more like pew 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 pew. It's that, because we're talking about Contra, specifically Contra III: The Alien Wars, which was originally released for the Super Nintendo on February 28th, 1992 in Japan. North America would get it on March 26th, Europe on September 12th, where it was renamed Super Probotector Alien Rebels, and the main characters were reworked to look more like robots.
Oh.
That's a thing I learned while looking into this. It was remade for the Game Boy and released in 1994, and then it got another remake for the GBA that released in 2002, though Europe did not get it until 2003. It was developed and published by Konami. It is the third game, though actually if you count a Game Boy spin-off, it is actually the fourth game in Konami's legendary run-and-gun franchise Contra, which again, like I said at the top of the show, somehow we have not touched any of those yet. Probably because, as far as I know, there's only 2 worth talking about. But or 3? There might be 3 worth talking about. I think people like Super C a lot.
Yeah.
It's basically Super C, 3, and 4 are the only games I ever seen anybody talk about in the Contra series.
And then there's, the original that everyone pairs with the Konami code, and there's that, but I don't know how much the soundtrack is lauded in that.
Mm-hmm. Well, the soundtrack for 3 was actually a departure from how the rest of the series had been, but we'll get to that in a second. Contra is kind of the mother of all run and gun games. I'm sure there were run and gun games before Contra, but when you think of run and gun, odds are you probably think of Contra pretty early on that list. It is, if you've never seen it, that game where it's a big, manly man and he's firing this gun that has, like, laser bullets that never stop, and also you can get a bunch of other types of weapons and stuff like that.
You're like two Rambos going around.
Yeah. The series started as an arcade game that was released in 1987. And as we just said, you're a big macho man, you're a Rambo, you're two big macho men, because you can also play the entire game in co-op, so you could be two of them with a second player.
Another comparison that could be made to Gears.
Yeah. And they have big guns. These big guns shoot big bullet. And that's Contra. While in stages, you can actually pick up power-ups that will alter how your gun fires. There are 5 shot types. There's homing missile, torpedo, flamethrower, laser, and most famous of all, spread shot. You can carry 2 of these shot types because both characters are equipped with 2 guns that you can switch between at will. But Contra is infamous for being really hard. Like, really, really hard, because if you get hit by anything once, you die, you lose a life, and whatever power-up was on the gun you were holding when you died is now gone. Once your lives are gone, it's game over. Go start the game again. I think there is a very good reason for why this game has the most famous cheat code of all time to give you more lives, being, like you mentioned earlier, the Konami code, which is, I think, has its origins completely in Contra, just in general. I don't remember if it was in any other games before that.
I think you're right about that. It's also commonly referred to as the Contra code. It was popularized among North American players in Contra on NES.
Okay, so yeah, it came from Contra, and I, again, think it's saying something that's the game that has, again, the most famous cheat code of all time.
Oh, interesting. But it was first used in the release of Gradius on NES, a side-scrolling shooter. Probably also very difficult, but yes, popularized with Contra, yeah.
Yeah, I believe Gradius is considered quite difficult as well. But yeah, there's 6 stages. Majority of those stages are side-scrolling, 4 of them specifically. But 2 of them are actually controlled from a top-down perspective, which I've seen gameplay of these. They look awful.
Yeah.
They just look awful.
It's wild, and it's like, trying something new at the time, but it has not held up well.
Yeah, it was taking full advantage of the SNES's Mode 7 capabilities, its renderer that let it do semi-3D stuff. But, it looks very dated, and it does not look like it would be fun to play in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't look good. But maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. The plot of Contra 3, though, it's really simple. You see, aliens are invading, and so you take control of Bill Reiser and Lance Bean, 2 commandos who are working to fight those aliens off. And there's a lot of bullets and explosions and aliens. That is the plot of Contra 3. So this is where I will ask, Peter, what are your experiences with Contra 3 or Contra in general?
I want to play as Lance Bean. I have not played Contra ever, much less Contra 3. I feel like the only thing I did know about this game was the top-down sections, actually. So interesting how that's carried over. But yeah, good to finally talk about it and bring the franchise overall to this attention on the show.
Yeah, Contra does not seem like the type of game you or I would play.
No, yeah.
Again, famous for being super difficult. And I have also never really touched a Contra game. I've seen them played enough, I guess, not to a huge degree, but I've seen people play them. But yeah, they ain't my personal cup of tea. And I don't think that's gonna change at any point.
For me, it's like Ghosts and Goblins too. Like, okay,
Oh, yeah.
I've seen enough. I know the gist of it. I appreciate those that play it well, but I will pass on it myself, thanks. I will watch from a distance.
I respect that this game exists, but no thank you. We'll get to talk about that later in a couple of months, huh? Yeah. Let's talk about how Contra 3 came to be made, because it was actually like I said, not just the soundtrack, but the entire game was kind of a departure from the rest of the Contra series in a lot of ways. So, the team behind Contra 3 was led by a man named Nobuya Nakazato, and this was his first time working on a Contra game outside of doing a little bit of testing on Super C, but just testing. It was also only his third year at Konami, and he was leading a Contra game? And granted, it's not like Contra was Castlevania at that point, but it was still pretty big overall. Especially in arcades, which this game wasn't in arcades. That's bizarre, because the last two were. The last two mainline, not the Game Boy one. That one was on the Game Boy. This team happened to work in an office that was right next door to the team that made the original arcade game, though, so they were able to just sort of walk across the hall and show them progress reports and get a lot of feedback from them often. So they talked about that a lot as if that was, that was something that really, really helped development of this game move along at a good pace. Early coverage of the game, though, referred to it as Contra 4. I expect due to the fact that that Game Boy spinoff was a thing. But eventually it was Nintendo Power who confirmed that it was actually officially titled Contra 3. And to Nakazato, again, this being his first time leading a Contra game, Contra had the energy of a low-budget Hollywood action movie to him, and he wanted to really, really lean into this, like cheesy, machismo, who cares if it makes sense, just really, really get in there. And he felt that he would have to change the combat from previous games because, in his opinion, it was too realistic. I don't know what kind of guns he's ever looked at, but he said it was too realistic. Take that for what you will. And he wanted to take it in a more ridiculous direction. The example that it gave for how ridiculous a direction this went in, there is a sequence where the player must hang from flying missiles while shooting enemies, and there's like a helicopter flying in the background, and apparently this sequence almost, like, not literally, but basically almost melted an SNES because it was pushing the thing to its absolute limit. Like, this thing could barely handle what they were doing with it. And this was in 1992.
That's pretty early on, yeah.
The N64 was still a couple years out. He also felt that the previous games had too predictable of a pattern to their gameplay, being you fight a bunch of weak enemies, and then you fight a hard boss, and then you fight a bunch of weak enemies, and then you fight a hard boss. So he and his team decided that they wanted to make it their policy that something interesting would happen every 3 screen scrolls. Now, Contra 3 reviewed incredibly well upon release, the equivalent of a 9 out of 10 for pretty much every outlet that I could see. I think the closest to not being that was Famitsu, who gave it a 28, which seems low, but it's Famitsu. What are you going to do? Praise was really given to the new tone of gameplay, which Nakazato was very happy about because he was actually kind of worried that people wouldn't like it, that they'd get mad that he had changed it so much. So that worked out. That was a gamble that paid off. The visuals were also highly praised. I would hope so, if they were essentially overclocking a SNES to make them happen. And the soundtrack, which the publication Mean Machines, I've never heard of it, they said that it rivaled the score of ActRaiser. We've talked about ActRaiser. That is high praise, especially back then.
That sure is. Wow.
It was a nominee for Nintendo Power's Game of the Year, but as far as I could tell, because this was the early 90s, that's pretty much the closest to any awards the game won. Programmers from the Contra III team would leave Konami shortly after completion of Contra III to join Treasure, where they would be some of the leaders behind the team who developed Gunstar Heroes. So there is a clear point A to point B from there, which makes 100% sense. That checks out. There were 10 Contra games released after this, though for a lot of Contra fans, the series is essentially dead. The latest games have not been well received. In fact, 2019's Contra Rogue Corps, which is the last game that came out in the series, released to really poor reviews. I'm talking like 4 out of 10.
Yeah, it's not a good game.
Yeah, people were not super happy with it.
I remember the reveal where people was like, "Oh, it's Contra," and it was like, "Oh, not
no.
like this."
It was the Konami equivalent to the Commander Keen reveal at Bethesda's E3 conference in 2019.
Like Metal Gear Survive.
Oh. Contra 3 is considered by many to be the best game in the franchise. The easiest way that you could probably play it nowadays is as part of the Contra Anniversary Collection, which released, I think, in 2018. You can buy it on Switch, PS4, Xbox One, PC. I will say that one of the biggest criticisms of that collection I did see is that there are no save states or rewind, which...
Oh, come on.
Contra seems like a series that needs that more than most, which it's not super surprising. The Castlevania Anniversary Collection also has that problem. But it also, from what I can tell, not only has Contra 3, but also has Super Probotector Alien Rebels. So that might be a sell-up for you. So the composer that we're going to talk about for Contra 3 is Miki Higashino. Not a ton of information on her, but there's something. She was born on January 1st, 1968 in Takarazuka, Hyogo, Japan. She is sometimes credited as Miki-chan or Miki-chong. She was a regular collaborator with the Konami Kukeiha Club, at least back in the day, and it seems that she mostly left the industry in 2001 after having a child. She did come back a couple of times, just briefly, but her last project, I think, was in like 2007. So she does not work in the industry anymore. In terms of her discography, she is one of the composers behind Gradius, which, hey, there you go. There's another connection to Gradius. A game called Salamander, Gradius 3, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the 1989 game, as well as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters, the Genesis version specifically. Double Dribble, the Playoff Edition, which it sounds familiar, so I put it on there, but I don't actually know what it is. I assume basketball. I don't know what else it would be. It's probably basketball. Tokimeki Memorial, which, that's a game I should probably bring at some point, because that seems like a really weird, fun one to talk about. Like one of the first dating sims ever made. She was the main composer behind Suikoden and Suikoden 2.
Oh, man.
The first game of which she apparently wrote 105 tracks for. She was one of the composers behind Moon, which was an Onion Games game that we talked about when we talked about Dandy Dungeon a couple months ago. And her last project, and this happened after she had left due to maternity leave, she came back briefly to work on the game 10,000 Bullets. And this was alongside Yasunori Mitsuda, which she had actually worked with Mitsuda a couple of times at that point as well. She also works with a couple other Konami composers quite often, including the two others that were on Contra 3. So the soundtrack was not only composed by Miki Higashino, but also Masanori Adachi and Tapi Iwase, who we actually talked about just recently in episode 172 for his work on Metal Gear Solid. The music was actually purposefully given a, quote, cinematic style and quality, specifically to work together with Nakazato's idea of giving the game a low-budget movie feeling. So the music was, again, another departure from how Contra was in the past. Now, the titles that I'll be using for this Critical 5 are, I believe, just what fans call them. This game has gotten official releases, but A, none of them can agree on what the tracks are called. B, none of them are the full soundtrack, except for one, which does have alternative soundtracks that we will mention from the vinyl release of the Contra III soundtrack. But also C, none of them mentioned who composed what.
Yeah.
I looked through like 3 releases on VGMDB, and there's just, it's all just, it was the Konami Kukeha Club. Don't ask who.
Which feels like a common thing for the Konami games at the time. So we just put it on the video version here as Miki Higashino et al.
Yeah. So let's get in to that Critical 5. And I want to stress to people, I've never played this game. I only listened through, and these are the tracks that really stood out to me, though this soundtrack as a whole is really, really good. Probably, I think, among the better soundtracks on the SNES. First critical track we're going to talk about is The Streets of Neo City. First of all, is there any more stereotypical, bland name for a place in a sci-fi story than Neo City?
They tried so hard.
I don't think there's any possible way to make that more bland. This is also called It's Time for Revenge, which is a bit of a better title, I think. But this is, as far as I can tell, the first level of the game. And this is basically what you're going to expect from this game. It's got this really fast sort of pace to it. It feels hectic because everything's exploding around you. Things in Contra don't get chill at any point. That's just not how these games roll. So it makes sense that the song just like it keeps moving and it sounds dire and also sounds like the instrumentation is very manly. And I think this is a perfect representation of what to expect going forward from this soundtrack.
I think it's wild that a Super Nintendo game or Super Famicom game in the early 90s has the channels, the layers to devote to a kick bass drum and also a timpani sound effect. We got both going at the same time. And that's wild.
And yet it still sounds so full. Like it doesn't sound like they sacrificed anything to put those two in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really, really neat. Like this sounds kind of close to something I feel like I'd hear on a Genesis almost. Not as quite as crunchy, but you know, it's very similar. Following that, we have critical track number 2. This one might actually be my favorite name because this place just sounds cool. This is The Old Cyber Steel Mill. This song continues my theory that every song in Contra sounds like you should be fighting a boss to it. Because this certainly does. I think this is my favorite song on the Critical 5. This song is also known as Battle Runner, which is not nearly as good of a name. But hey, you know, it's cool, and I like it. Again, it's just moving constantly. And it kind of does have this sort of factory-ish, mill-ish feeling to it, I guess. But, I mean, nothing's going to live up to the name of the old cyber steel mill.
These horns are crazy. You've heard this instrument in other Super Nintendo games. I feel like maybe Mega Man X comes to mind a little bit.
Yeah.
But the frenetic pace, like charting this out is nuts. And Higashino, or whoever worked on this one, had a wild melody in mind for it, and it's super impressive.
Again, Contra doesn't get chill at any point when you're playing it, so the music does a really good job of making sure you're always on your toes. And you can also say that about Critical Track number 3. This is Battle of the Blazing Sky. The song is also known as Daredevil, not the Persona one. We'll talk about that one day. But first of all, that bass is great. And I like that it's kind of the main character, but also, what other game does this sound like?
I keep getting Mega Man vibes. I don't know if it's X or if it's something like that, but maybe I just think Mega Man. I don't know if that's just like basic of me, but...
Because it still keeps that feeling I've been talking about of like, it's got to keep you on your toes. It's always moving. It is, it's going and going and going. But it also sounds a little bit different from the last two tracks. And I think a big part of it is that it's a little lighter on instrumentation, and that bass is just front and center. And it's really, really, well, it's not front and center, but it's the thing you notice the earliest, I think, or at least it was for me. And it's just good. It's bass is manly, I guess is what I'm saying.
There is a certain way to kind of amp up the drama and the tension if you're trying to create like it's like so bad it's good sort of Hollywood movie, but like these orchestra hits, like, yeah, it gets your attention right away and tries to inflate the drama of the scene.
Yeah. Let's get to the fourth critical track, which is my favorite to say, not so much my favorite title. That still goes to Cyber Steel Mill, which I want to keep saying. But my favorite to say is the Mucho Grande Badlands. Look, what do you want from me? Spanish is fun to say when you don't speak it. Other languages are fun to say. This song is also known as Hell Messenger, which I will admit is a more metal name, so I'll give it that. This is another song that it sounds a little different from the rest of the stuff. This one has a bit more... While the rest of the soundtrack has like a hectic sort of... We're under attack and you're fighting for your life. This one feels a little more heroic in a lot of ways, like a little more hopeful, and to me it sounds less like, oh, we're fighting for our lives to survive, and more, we are now making the aliens fight for their lives or they won't survive. And I think that's kind of cool, especially for a song for a stage that I assume, based on the track location, takes place rather late in the game.
It's probably the most chill, I would think, that this game gets as far as like the energy that it brings to the piece. It makes me think of like the past in Chrono Trigger. There's kind of like, I feel like tribal sort of instruments at play, or at least playing it up a little bit more than some of the other tracks do. But that's kind of the impression I get from it.
Yeah, I could see that. Now, I talked about how earlier Contra games had this sort of pattern of weak enemies, hard boss, weak enemies, hard boss, but we haven't talked about any of the boss music. And honestly, the one that caught my attention the most, and as well it should, this is critical track number 5, Last Boss. This song is also known as The Showdown, and in direct contrast to the previous track we talked about, this one now feels... It's again a little bit lighter on instrumentation than the other songs, but it's very oppressive nonetheless with that heavy piano. And it sounds intimidating, it sounds evil. And I would assume it's going to be, like, Contra bosses are generally pretty big, and they fill the screen with crap that will kill you if it touches you. And I would assume the final boss is probably, that times 5. So I think this really brings across this sort of almost desperate feeling of we have to push through and take this thing out, and then we'll have stopped the alien wars. I assume they're called the alien wars in the universe. I don't know. But yeah, I think this song is rather interesting. Again, sounds a lot different from like the streets of Neo City, where it feels less like a hectic fight for your life and more like a we're here and fighting insurmountable odds, let's do it.
It really does capture that like final showdown feel, doesn't it? It's not just a normal boss. If anything, it has like a Final Fantasy final boss stakes to it without, before we got to like Dancing Mad and One-Winged Angel and all that. Like, it's got that gravitas to it. So I'm impressed.
So for tracks on the cutting room floor, I got 2. The first is Maria Calderon Highway. I don't know who Maria Calderon is, but her highway has really cool music. The song is also known as Megalopolis, which is not nearly as good. These are like a toss-up every track. I really, really dig this song, especially with its almost like pseudo-jazzy feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's not something I expect out of Contra, but it fits really well, and I guess especially fits the environment of a highway, which I assume you're on during this level, because it's called Maria Calderon Highway, so it works.
I feel the same way. Like, it's got that energy to it that you're probably driving by on a vehicle and still shooting around. I like how this sounds a lot. It may be one of my favorites. I just don't get a Contra feeling from it, which, it's good. It shows diversity, but yeah, I like this one.
Yeah, it's weird. And I think that alone, it's here because it's a really good song, but that alone also deserves a shout out of just, this is some real diverse stuff that we're finding here. And lastly, we talked about the final boss fight, but let's talk about regular boss fights. This is my second track of the cutting room floor, Boss Battle. The song is also known as Bloody Storm. No, not the JoJo opening. I'll make that joke as many times as I can in one episode. I don't think it's as good as the final boss battle, but like, the bosses are a big part of Contra, and I figured, you know what? It's probably good to go ahead and highlight the boss fight theme like the regular one. I don't think that the regular boss fight theme is, like, bad. It's just, I don't know, it doesn't impress me, but it's one you should shout out at least.
For sure, definitely an important one that you'll hear quite a bit, but it feels like they're throwing a bunch of different instruments in the kitchen sink in a way. Like, we're using instruments that, you know, probably aren't being heard a lot throughout, like this little kind of wind up sound. Like, I don't know if you're hearing that throughout the rest of the game. So it's a very, I feel like a mishmash kind of a piece, and still creates attention to it. Once the melody kicks in, like, yeah, you feel the direction this piece is going in, but there's a lot of odd instrument choices going in here.
Yeah, I kind of agree. It reminds me of, it is the music equivalent of Rainbow Cruise in Mario 64. Hey, we have all these assets. Let's just put them here in a random assortment. So what will I never forget about Contra 3? And there's not much. Again, I don't foresee myself playing this game at any point in my life. It's just not a game that seems like it appeals to me. It's got a cool soundtrack, and as far as I can tell, did some really cool, impressive stuff with visuals and all that. But I'm good.
Yeah, I agree. Good to talk about on the show for bringing the franchise here. Always good to hear more work of the Kukeha Club, right? But yeah, I don't see myself like, ooh, now that I've heard the music, I need to go play Contra 3. No, I'm good. Thanks.
I hope for all of you Contra fans' sake, you all get a new game and it's good.
I hope for a lot of Konami fans that's the case, but
for almost every franchise they own,
get that pachinko money rolling in. Ugh. Well, I don't think I'll even go back to play Gears 5, to be honest, but they're both good examples of you want to pew, 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 shoot up some aliens, even in possible co-op. Those are going to be some good options for you with Gears 5, with Contra 3, The Alien Wars. So that will do it for us this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at PeteSpeakEasy. Joe is over at StringPixel. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, but that's that MP3 podcast version that you want. That's hosted by Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. That's where Joe's other podcast, Smasherpieces, is hosted. And you can find Smasherpieces and Original Soundchat wherever you get your podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, even on Spotify, where we have a feed of podcast episodes, but we also have a playlist on Spotify, where if we talk about a video game music track on the show and it's on Spotify, it's getting added to this monster playlist. Joe, what's being added this week?
So Gears 5 is on Spotify, so that'll end up on there. There are no Contra games on Spotify. Konami is really hit and miss for music that shows up on any streaming service. 'Cause, like, a lot of Metal Gear is still missing. Any Castlevania from before the PS1 is missing. It's bizarre.
It's very, very strange. Also, maybe Gears 5 being on Spotify means we'll just get hit with copyright faster somehow. I don't know. Who knows? When you're done listening, you can find the show on social media at Soundchat OST. You can leave some feedback for us, how we're doing with these episodes. Also, suggestions for games to cover in the future, especially as we round out 2022. And we are 20 episodes away from the big 200. That's crazy.
We're officially halfway into 2022. Oh. That's nuts.
That does not feel real at all. You're right. All right, Joe, who are we talking about next week?
Next week, I will be talking, finally, for real this time, hopefully, maybe. I probably shouldn't say that. I'll curse myself. I'll be talking about Slide 20XX.
And I will be talking about Philip Shepard. All right, Joe, let's play us out.
So, it's hard to look up remixes of songs for a game that you generally just don't have a lot of experience with. But, I mean, it's a Contra game. It's not like there's a shortage of Contra remixes. And I found one that I really, really liked from these Super Guitar Bros, who I believe we have also brought up in the past for some transition tracks. They did a acoustic/classical guitar cover of Stage 3 and a boss medley. And hey, these songs actually translate really well into acoustic. It's kind of shocking, actually. So please enjoy that.
Thanks so much for listening this week on Original Soundchat. We'll see you next time. Take care.